Getting tough on Myanmar, Malaysia leads calls to exclude the army chief from an upcoming ASEAN summit if no progress is made on a peace plan. And for a closer look into this story, Professor Thitinan Pongsudhirak from Chulalongkorn University in Bangkok joins us. Professor, is there any precedent for excluding an ASEAN leader for the summit?
Excluding a leader, we have not seen that before. We've seen Myanmar itself skipping the chairmanship of ASEAN back in 2006. But this is anomalous, I think, something we've not seen before. And it tells, it foretells and indicates what kind of serious situation this is.
Well, some ASEAN members have been more vocal than others since the February coup. How deep are divisions within the group on how to deal with Myanmar now, Professor?
Well, since February 1st, since the coup in Myanmar, I think we have to realize, first of all, it was a very kind of abrupt turn of events. That the coup was very dark. There's been repression. There's basically a military dictatorship after a decade of reforms and liberalization. So I think, it's like they pulled the plug on Myanmar, the Tatmadaw, the military led by Senior General Min Aung Hlaing. So the divisions within ASEAN, we also have to see, Don, that there have been divisions already before the Myanmar coup on the South China Sea, going back to 2012. So ASEAN now really has to kind of close ranks and find ways to reunite, to find common ground and regain its footing. The Myanmar crisis has exacerbated that because it was such a dark coup, it was violent, and violence is still ongoing. And the ASEAN members have had to take a stand. I think some members say that, this is unacceptable. There has been a 5-point consensus back in April after almost 3 months. And now after 8 months, there's been no progress. It's almost like General Min Aung Hlaing is having an upper hand on ASEAN and taking ASEAN to task, taking ASEAN for a ride. So the divisions are going to run deeper because some other countries will see this as acceptable, as part of the course, and it's not helped by other regional events and that we've seen. The Australia, UK, US security pact, for example, has also divided ASEAN. So the Myanmar situation has worsened already a divided ASEAN.
You mentioned the April peace plan that was sort of mapped out by ASEAN at the time. Tell us why no progress has been able to be made. That 5-point consensus, it took some time to come up, to be formed and shaped. There was a lot of behind the scenes diplomacy, lobbying, and finally, it was a little bit late, but nevertheless, there was a consensus on the cessation of violence, the dialogue and the release of police prisoners. But the main clause, I think the main agreement was to get a mediation with a envoy to visit the country and also to have humanitarian assistance. Now, we have not seen the last 2 points executed at all. In fact, ASEAN is behind the curve. There's an envoy, but he has not been able to visit the country and see all sides of the conflict. There's not been the humanitarian assistance that has been agreed. So in fact, what we're seeing on the ground is a situation spiraling into a civil war, more violence on the ground. The Tatmadaw, the military, has power, but they don't have control of the country. And we're seeing a kind of a nationwide uprising against the military. This is something we've not seen. It's unprecedented in Myanmar. Normally, a coup like that, with the military in charge, they would be able to consolidate and control, but they're not doing that at this time. And we're seeing the dissidents and the anti-military movement behind the national unity governments actually gaining ground. So, this is really a big challenge for ASEAN. I think it's an existential challenge, because if ASEAN is not able to apply and implement the 5-point consensus, it will lose even more relevance and credibility in the eyes of the international community.
Well, there's certainly a lot of pressure on the special envoy that you mentioned, Erwan Yusof. He's going to be visiting Myanmar next week, but he's been blocked from meeting Ms. Suu Kyi at all. So what can he accomplish reasonably under the current circumstances, Professor?
Yeah, it's a tough dilemma. I mean, this is a imbroglio, is a predicament. I think that it's a kind of brinkmanship, Don. I mean,
Senior General Min Aung Hlaing, he wants control, he wants credibility, he wants it both ways. He wants to have repression, but also yet have credibility from ASEAN, using ASEAN as a platform for international credibility. So I think the special envoy has to be very careful not to be used, not to be exploited, and to maintain the ASEAN 5-point consensus that he has to be able to see all sides, all parties, including the NLD, former NLD leader Aung San Suu Kyi, who's been persecuted. And he has to also see the other ethnic minority groups and all the other parties involved in this conflict. Otherwise, it's a moot point. Otherwise, ASEAN will make matters from bad to worse by losing even more credibility for being used by the junta in Myanmar.
Professor, thank you for your insight as always. Professor Thitinan Pongsudhirak from Chulalongkorn University.